My name is Diana Hanson, and I've lived in the Bridges home since 1988. I just love this house. I love everything about it. I love the feeling that I had from it, from having been here and visiting Eleanor Bridges, and she loved this house. George, her husband, built it totally himself. She had lived here 69 years, and she loved it, so she made me love it. Well, this house is on the Jefferson County Registry sign. It's named Bridges Studios. That's because they came here originally to work as artists. As time went on, they would continue to build on and make it their home.
My name's Will Womack. I am a member of the Homewood Historic Preservation Commission. Always sort of been intrigued by the house behind the high hedge like a lot of people. Well, I suppose I've noticed it since I moved to Homewood over a decade ago, but I didn't really know anything about it until zoning hearing came up to subdivide the lots, to redevelop it. And that happened to be the same day that I was appointed to the Historic Preservation Commission. And so that prompted me to go and find out a little bit more on my own. So I've poked around in some of the archives and just to kind of get a sense for myself about what the house's history was, its significance, and the people who owned it, the George and Eleanor Bridges, who were interesting characters in Homewood's history. Well, there's a lot of newspaper clippings about the Bridges, about their house, about their garden, about their artwork. So George and Eleanor Bridges are something like Homewood royalty. A lot of people refer to the pink house as the secret garden, as some people say, and imagine that a princess lived behind this castle wall and the princess in the pink house sort of thing.
If I had to describe Eleanor Massey Bridges, she was highly educated as a young woman. Her father obviously valued education because he ran the Massey School of Business, and she went to all kinds of schools. She went to a school in Pennsylvania. She roomed with Amelia Earhart. She studied art all over the world. So she was a very educated woman.
Oh, she was just a lovely lady. She was real short. She was known for wearing big hats and tall shoes. When I picked her up one time, and I had a little bitty car, and I was so worried that she wouldn't fit in there because she had this big old hat. I said, you know what, Miss Bridges, I have this really small car. And she said, never you mind. And she took that hat off and put it in her lap, and she never looked in a mirror to fix it. She just plopped it back on her head. And she loved beautiful clothes and hats and shoes.
She was involved in a lot of civic activism, the ballet, the symphony, the botanical gardens. Felt a sense of obligation to give back to the community, but also to make Birmingham the best it could be.
I think Eleanor tried to be a very philanthropic figure throughout Birmingham. She was involved in a number of civic organizations in the community, and that includes the Birmingham Museum of Art. This is 5 Dogs by Eleanor Bridges, which was probably featured in an exhibition. It took place in the 1970s here at the Birmingham Museum of Art, in which we featured 100 paintings of dogs by Eleanor Bridges. She was particularly well known for painting dogs. She had an incredible career, was part of an artistic family really, and was very well trained.
I stayed up there and I went to the University of Pennsylvania.
Oh, yeah.
And took classes there, but lived at the school. And that's where I roomed with Amelia Earhart. You know, people.
Oh, right, yes.
She then spends time in Cincinnati, which is actually where she meets her husband, George Bridges. And I think it's the two of them together that really are able to create this incredible artistic world for themselves that they exist within. They're interacting with all kinds of leading lights in the art world. They don't live in Birmingham. They're really citizens of the world. She and her husband really did help to shape arts culture in mid-20th century Birmingham, and we're happy to have her represented in our collection for that reason.
George Bridges was less of a public figure than his wife was, right? Eleanor was very much involved in the public eye in lots of different ways, but he expressed his public vision through his art.
George was a wonderful artist, and there's lots of sculpture in the garden that he did. This is a piece of marble that we found in the garden, and it was buried under the ground. And then we found out that a sculptor does not destroy things that aren't working out right, he just buries it. So there are many things we found in the garden that George is buried here because he didn't like how it looked.
His public art, of course, is in prominent places: Lynn Park, 5 Points South, Gorgas Library at the University of Alabama, various courthouses around Alabama and Louisiana. So a lot of memorial-type sculpture that's meant for public consumption and reflection. And I think that reflects his personality to some. That's something that comes across in the archive very strongly. There's also letters that give you a sense of what their relationship is. They talk about almost a spiritual connection. Even if she's away, they're writing to each other, and you can feel that they are in love with each other, even though they have certain problems with their relationship, like a lot of people do. They always refer to this kind of cosmic link that they feel, even over the distance, which is, I think, quite interesting. They were somewhat opposite, I guess, in certain ways. He does not seem to have been from a particularly wealthy family, right? He grew up in East Tennessee, went into the service as an infantryman. She, of course, was a much more privileged background. And their personalities are different, of course. He seems to be much more introverted. She's the opposite, right? She's involved in everything and makes her opinion known about everything. That's a contrast that comes across really strongly.
But you can almost get this sense that she saw something in George Bridges that nobody else would have seen. Their early years of marriage, they spent a lot of time apart. She never really seemed to give up. She always pursued him, and she seemed to be the constant in the relationship, almost in a stubborn way where she knew who George was and she was always going to stand by his side. And I think that's one of the qualities that she had, was she saw things in people that other people wouldn't see. When they took kids in during the Depression, she established art colonies all over the world. So she had this unique ability to see things in people, and really in artwork too.
But you know, you can look at this house and tell what artists they were. The way it was designed and the beautiful windows. The exterior of the home is mostly terracotta block, and the house has always been pink. Eleanor loved that. It has so many vines on it that she loved and took a lot of years to grow.
So why would they choose Edgewood? Well, this was 1920. I think they bought the property in 1919. So Homewood was just coming into existence. Edgewood was not built up. Maybe they had this vision to build a house that would be an expression of theirselves, their art, you know, and to use as a studio, a live-in studio.
So Edgewood back then was considered out in the country or out in the woods. When her and George built this house, they wanted the house itself to be art. George did a lot of the sculptures. He did a lot of the ironwork himself. And I think there was a nook where the kitchen was, and then there was a nook where they slept. But it started off as just a big room where they could have this art studio, and it was really intended to be a retreat from the hustle and bustle of downtown Birmingham, where artists could come and relax and have the peace to do what they needed to do regarding their art. And there are even accounts where people came to visit the Bridges and literally had to walk through the woods to get there. I mean, Edgewood Boulevard wouldn't have been a paved street at all. And so they referred to it as kind of their retreat in the woods.
It really is a special house to a lot of people. The people that have been here just loved Eleanor's home. F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway have been here.
There are several rumors about the house. One of those rumors is that the Fitzgeralds and Hemingway probably attended parties at the house. It is a fact that the Bridges spent time with those people in France. Now, did they ever come here and spend time together? I've never read anything about that. I've heard stories that they did. Probably the wildest rumor is that there's somebody buried there. There was a close friend of Eleanor Bridges who said that she wanted to be buried on the property. And where exactly is that on the property? I don't know if anybody knows that.
We can guess where we think she is. Eric and I think we know, but it's okay if she's here, you know. Never bothered us. I wish I could live here until I died, and I'd want to get sprinkled in here.
My name is Martha Robb, and I live in Edgewood. I live directly across the street from the Bridges house. I was born in 1944 along with my twin brother, and he now lives next door. So we've been around here for a long time. Growing up, the Bridges home it had an air of mystique about it. With the perimeter of trees, we really couldn't see the house that well. So at Halloween, we would knock on the door and Miss Bridges would answer the door and we would holler trick or treat and she would give us some candy or something. And it was always very interesting, I thought, to live across the street from the Bridges. And George's had a big pink Cadillac with big fins on the back. I thought that was so neat to see that big car come out of that driveway.
When we bought the house, everything was turquoise and kind of a mustard color. And she had very heavy red velvet curtains in all the windows. And they used to have this rugs hanging from the balcony. There were a lot of dried flowers in here that she would get from the garden and just enjoy them in here when they were fresh and then just let them dry. There are only 2 bedrooms, and the bedrooms are divided into suites. And there's a sleeping alcove that's just big enough for the bed, a little sitting room, and a bathroom. And the balcony that overlooks this living room, the ceiling here is about 26 feet tall. The meditation room, we call it, was Eleanor's meditation room. She would go up there and read and think and look at her garden, because you can see the garden really pretty from up there. When they first were here, and they had 1 or 2 horses, and the house behind this house was originally stables for those horses. Then as the years went by, they fixed up the stables for a home for their daughter, London. And she lived there for many, many years.
When my brother and I were about 4 years old, London Bridges, George's and Eleanor's daughter, was an artist, and she asked my mother if she could paint a portrait of my brother and me. And we went over and sat for the portrait. London naturally inherited her talent from her parents and was a wonderful artist.
We've had so many happy times here. This garden was the inspiration for our business, which we've had 30 years. I can walk in the garden and see something, and Eric will take a picture of it, and the next thing you know, it's on a t-shirt.
I ended up working for Diana at Brookwood Mall for 15 years, and I enjoyed it so much, and she has become just a really good friend and neighbor too. The White Flowers store is a wonderful reflection of the garden.
The merchandise in the store is a reflection of really Eleanor Bridges' vision of what that garden should be and what that represents in the city of Homewood. So I know they've done a wonderful job taking care of the property. And when you walk by, you always see Diana out there working in the garden. It's neat to know that as long as Eleanor Bridges was working in the garden, Diana has carried that tradition through as best as she can.
We get all our plants at Sweet Pea's garden shop in Homewood, and he said to me, I'm going to get you the prettiest pansies. So I've planted them all, even though I know that they're just going to be plowed up. But I couldn't bear not to embellish the garden like I've always done and keep it special till the day we walk out of here. In 2004, my father had Alzheimer's, and we needed to help my mother. He was in a facility for 11 years. She ran out of money, so we had to sell our house to help her. The house is going to be torn down and the garden plowed down. You know, it is his right to develop it as just a businessman, but now we do pray every day that he would change his mind. You know, we really do love this house. It's given back to us as much as we've given to it, because we work hard in the garden. For 32 years, we've kept the garden beautiful. We're not gardeners as much as we're laborers. More than that, this was my home. I felt like a caretaker for Eleanor because I knew her love for this place.
The owner gave a group of people the opportunity to try to purchase the house or raise funds, but $2.5 million is a lot of money to raise. But unfortunately, that money was not able to be raised, and so it looks like the house is going to be destroyed.
People have spoken out as they learned about the plan to redevelop that lot. Some people in the community banded together and formed an organization to raise money, raise awareness. They've had some social media presence about it, and they're selling ribbons to tie on your mailbox, pink ribbons to represent the Pink House. That's been a grassroots effort, and historic preservation really is often a result of grassroots effort.
Unfortunately, they weren't able to meet their goal for raising $2.5 million to purchase the house, but one of the best things to come out of that was it did generate a lot of knowledge and a lot of interest in the Pink House, and really conversations about historic preservation in general.
The reason it's important to save the house, there are a number of reasons, but architecturally it's significant. Historically, its associations with the Bridges is very important because the Bridges family was so important from the earliest days of Birmingham. And it's especially important to Homewood because Homewood is so much under development pressure. If Homewood does not decide to preserve its historic neighborhoods, they're not going to be preserved. So this is right in the middle of a historic district, which is not yet been designated, but it could be. So this house is important to Homewood, it's important to Edgewood. Whatever it might be replaced with won't compare to the history and the architecture of what's there now.
A lot of the older homes are being torn down, and big, huge homes are taking the place of the older homes. The Bridges house is a little different than the other houses. It's a landmark in Homewood. It will be a great loss, not just for me, but for the city of Homewood.
Well, it's important to me just because I just love it, and I love the history of it, the wonderful feeling of walking around the garden. Sometimes I imagine at night Georges and Eleanor, who are so in love with each other, dancing around the living room. It is just a house that has feelings that go with it. You know, when we leave, we will have such a loss, such a big hole.
I do feel like I have an appreciation for its significance, much more than I ever did before. It was just a mysterious house behind the hedge. So knowing a little bit more about the history, who the Bridges were, what their role in the community was, really underlines to me the importance of the house and how really fitting it would be for somebody to turn it into something that could preserve it, that would be a tangible kind of memory and an ongoing expression of the Bridges and their artistic contribution to Homewood and to the greater Birmingham area. One thing that communities can do to be proactive about historic preservation is to educate themselves and the public about historic preservation law, about the process of designating places as historic buildings or historic districts in order to preserve some of the character, some of the aesthetic of the community, because those are assets, historic assets really, that once they're gone, they can't be replaced. That's why preservation is so important, and it's sustainable too. Education is the main thing. If that's something that they value, they need to express that to their local officials, show how something can be done about it.
I have a friend that told me the story about her little son. He's a grown-up man now, married, and when she would push him around here in a stroller, he said, "Who lives in that house?" And she said, "I'm not sure." And he said, "Well, I know who lives in it. The Tooth Fairy lives in it." And so all these children, they think fairies live here and princesses live here. And I know when Eric and I first bought this house, we were working in the garden, and somebody passed by and we heard them say, "I think Mafia lives in there." You know, everybody has a story about it, about this house. They really do.
So when I was younger, whenever we would drive past the Pink House, you almost want your parents to slow down in the car so that you can kind of gaze through there. And I don't know if I had seen the movie Secret Garden, but that's what it made you think about. There was something mysterious in there, and we want to uncover what's inside of that. And now that we're talking about the story of the house, I think we all want to uncover what was Homewood, what was this rural place that everybody wanted to come to in the 1920s and 30s, what was so special about this place? But how do we keep that mysteriousness about Homewood being a rural retreat while still staying with the times in order to have good schools and to have business and to have property values that matter so that we can fund our schools? How do we balance all those things? That's the mystery that we're facing now, and it's almost the same mystery that we're trying to peel back when we're looking through those vines looking into the house.
And it all started out here in the studio. We thought we just wanted to be together, you see.
Yeah.
Because we were so in love, we didn't want to be with all these friends of ours. They were disturbances.
Mrs. Bridges, we've got to stop this. I've kept you much too long.
It just goes on fast.